This is AM Agenda. Thanks for your company with me this morning. Ed Husic and Josh Frydenberg having a bit of a chuckle in the ad break about Repeal Day. You're looking forward to it, Ed?
Sensational. They're doing so well with it. They're spring cleaning with a cotton bud. Good work.
This is your baby, though, Repeal Day, isn't it? About getting rid of the government red tape.
Well, it's a whole of government effort actually being led by the Prime Minister, and unfortunately for Labor, they never thought of this idea because they came up with 21,000 additional regulations, and they put a huge burden on business, on families and on the not-for-profit sector. So what we've done is a bit of spring cleaning, but also some very significant reforms which will reduce the burden of compliance right across the economy.
So how much are you talking in terms of dollars have been saved, in your view now, in terms of getting rid of the regulation?
$2.1 billion is our headline figure. We eradicated 10,000 pieces of regulation legislation the first repeal day, another 1,000 pieces of regulation legislation today. This is a significant effort. We've also released a new framework for auditing the performance of the regulators, because the Commonwealth has 150 regulators, Kieran. Some are large, like the ATO, ASIC, APRA and ACMA. Others are small, like the Office of Gene Technology or the Passports Office. We want them to be more efficient and effective in the administration of regulation.
Ed Husic, what's your view on this? Because it coincides with Deloitte Access report. Chris Richardson released it today about self-imposed red tape as well. How much scope is there here for boosting productivity? Is it something Labor didn't really focus too much on?
Well, the thing with what the coalition said about cutting red tape is they cut red tape and then they come along down the track and put the red sticky tape back on to cover up the stuff up in the cut they made earlier. I mean, they cut the independent the Intelligence Legislation Monitor that was shut down by them, and then they had to basically go, oh no, we need to bring it back in, particularly in the current security environment. They had to go back and re-adhere the tape that they claimed they'd cut. The savings, when you hear the term, these are the headline savings that we're going for, that doesn't mean the savings that they'll reach. This is a figure that they're aiming to do. I think they've only, based on the ones that they've announced so far, they're only going to hit, based on our calculations, over $1 million in savings at any rate.
So hang on, you've just been criticising us.
And on top of that, they just announced this petrol tax that for the 6,300 petrol stations around the country is going to whack $800 per petrol station in compliance costs. And what gets me is the party that's supposed to be about low tax and less red tape used an arcane Senate red tape measure, the equivalent of a council bylaw, to impose more tax on people in what they did yesterday on this shabby deal on fuel excise. So, they say one thing, but the actions don't actually reinforce.
Josh, your response to that?
Well, Ed and his fellow Travers in the Labor Party can't have it both ways. They can't say on the one hand that we're reducing protections by our changes to the future of financial advice, or our one-stop shops for environmental approvals, or our changes in the charities and not-for-profit sector, and on the other hand saying,
the sector hates
saying you're only doing very minor changes around the edges and you haven't made any savings. The truth is, we got our omnibus bill through the Senate, we got our changes to the agriculture and veterinary chemicals through the Senate, we got our changes of the classification through the Senate. We got our changes, the future of financial advice through the Senate. So we actually have banked, billions of dollars of reforms. As for the fuel excise, which is the topic of the day, this is going to lead to an increase of about 40 cents a week for the average family with, a tank of 50 litres.
No new taxes.
No, this is not a new tax. This is an indexation of an old tax, which was announced in the budget in May. We've actually been blocked in the Senate by the Labor Party, who created the problem in the first place, Kieran. $667 billion of debt, but is now not prepared to be part of the solution.
You should admit it's a new tax, though, shouldn't you? The Finance Minister said it's a revised implementation of the budget measure. You're trying to use every other phrase around it.
No, it's not a new tax. But let's go to the heart of this issue.
It's reviving a tax that hasn't been in place for nearly 2 decades.
Let's go to the heart of this.
Verbal gymnastics. Cirque du Soleil here on AM Agenda.
Let's go to the heart of this issue, which is we were left with this huge debt. So we have had to introduce a series of measures changes to foreign aid, nearly $8 billion worth of savings. Getting rid of the mining tax, a $10 billion
Oh, the mining
saving.
tax that you said was terrible, and then you...
Let's hear Josh. Let's hear Josh.
Well, the problem with the mining tax was all your associated spending measures because you never had any revenue. And this is the heart of the problem. There were $20 billion worth of savings we put forward to the Senate, including $5 billion of savings that Labor took to the last election themselves, which have been blocked. They haven't got behind any of our changes.
This is the point, isn't it, Ed Husic, that I'll put this to Chris Bowen, that I haven't seen an economist who's criticised the re-indexation of the fuel excise. They all believe it's a structural deficit in the budget, yet Labor wants to talk about keeping certain welfare provisions in place, certain payments in place, but you've got to also come up with a revenue stream. Surely this makes sense to re-index fuel excise.
These guys went into an election saying that they weren't about new taxes, and they've come out of it once they've grabbed the votes to basically break all those commitments. They lied to the Australian people, and the Australian people are paying for that lie. In my part of Western Sydney, where people are stuck in motorways for long periods of time, chewing up fuel, they now have all that time to remember that Tony Abbott never warned them that he would do this before the election. He didn't warn them because he wanted their votes, and now he's impacting on their family budgets. And so, this is the problem. They can't go around and claim, oh, we're doing this for the national good. Well, if they believed in the national good, why didn't they, confide in the nation before the election to do it?
That's fair enough talking about broken promises, and you can still make that point. But what about
how much time did we spend in the last term of Parliament talking about the fidelity with the public? About
fine, but you're the shadow parliamentary secretary for Treasury, for Treasurer matters. Isn't this about the economics of it? And I'm asking you again, doesn't it make economic sense?
Let's
to re-index it, because you've got every other price going up and indexed to inflation, and fuel you don't. This is also a Labor Party that believes in pricing carbon.
Let's talk through in terms of revenue streams. They come into government, they turn their back on nearly $1 billion or just over $1 billion in terms of tax reform to the way in which multinationals shift profit. They walked away from it. They refused to take on the taxation arrangements for wealthy superannuants who have got accounts over $2 million. They turned their back on it. They gifted the RBA $9 billion in terms of the Reserve Bank reserve.
After you took all that money out of it.
That money. They never went in there asking for it, but admittedly no government body is going to knock back $9 billion if you hand it over to them. So they either spend all this money, they turn their back on revenue streams, and then they slug ordinary families for what they're doing in terms
of the GST. This is a debate that hasn't got a lot of support already from the states, certainly none. I think New South Wales, Mike Baird's the only one who's shown any willingness to lead on this front. Is the Prime Minister serious about this, like his predecessor and hero John Howard, who took the GST, as unpopular as it was, to an election?
Well, he's serious about having a genuine debate and seeing what proposals come forth from the states, because you do have a situation where the Commonwealth is responsible for 45% of the revenue that the states and territories have. So the states and territories are responsible for the important delivery of services like health and education, but they have a constrained revenue base. So we need to look at this whole issue, and doing a federalism white paper together with a tax white paper is important. I mean, Ken Henry did a very good review of the tax system. Unfortunately, it stayed in Wayne Swan's drawer for nearly 6 months. But one of the things he pointed out, Kieran, was that in Australia we have 125 taxes, but just 10 of those taxes produce 90% of the revenue. We have 115 taxes producing 10% of the revenue.
So does the GST need to be? Does the GST need to be part of
absolutely
an increase in it?
No, the GST absolutely needs to be part of this discussion. And unlike the Labor Party, we're not prepared to shirk those hard discussions. But we need to have this discussion as a nation. The Federation is not working as smoothly as it should. The tax system is too complex. I mean, the Tax Act's more than 5,000 pages itself, and we have to look at how.
Do you see any reason, any argument that justifies an increase in the GST if you provide appropriate compensation at the lower end?
We went through the Henry Tax Review. We took the GST changes off the table, or any look at the GST, because frankly the GST, particularly for the people we represent, is regressive. And we didn't see any need for change back then. The claim that there's some sort of inherent courage in dealing with this now is just an insult to the Australian public. I mean, they did not have the courage before the election to say this.
Yeah, but they haven't done
in
anything.
fact,
They're going to take it to the next election.
They repeatedly said through the now Prime Minister that there would be no changes to GST.
Yeah, but there won't be this term if they take it to the next election.
Kieran,
That's
he never made that caveat.
It's being truthful.
He never made that caveat in those series of grabs that you and all the other media outlets played, where he said there will be no cuts to health, no cuts to education, no change to GST, no change
But
to
on that
ABCS,
basis, you'd never be allowed to raise anything new.
No, well,
in terms of government.
Again, he made honesty with people and trust in government a core issue. That was a deliverable, a KPI for him, and so that's certainly something that he needs to be held.
I just want to finish on one story. This relates to the targeting of Australian foreign fighters, possibly ASIS giving our military information on their whereabouts. This is the West Australian newspaper reporting this. Only a minute left. But this could see our jets reportedly targeting our own citizens. What do you make of that?
Well, we'll have to do everything we can as a nation to protect our security at home and, to protect Australian interests abroad. And if that involves taking new measures, as has been speculated today, then there'll be proper consultation, proper consideration, and then proper action. I mean, as Julie Bishop has revealed, we've cancelled 73 passports. 70 Australians have gone over to Syria and Iraq to participate in those activities, and another 185 Australians are providing support for those terrorist activities over there. This is a real problem. Let's not run away from it. Let's deal with it.
What do you think, Ed? Only about 20 seconds left on that.
Never easy choices, but what we're trying to do is make sure that people feel secure at home, and we work with our coalition partners to ensure that abroad that threat to our security doesn't reach us. So they're very difficult.
Gentlemen, thank you both, Josh and Ed. A quick break on AM Agenda. Back in just a moment. Stay with us.